Everyone, for today's lesson, we are going to learn how to factor quadratics when a equals 1. So this lesson is all about just factoring when a equals 1, with the learning target for this lesson being that I can factor quadratic expressions, once again, just when a equals 1. So before we get started, I would like you guys to please go ahead and complete this warm-up. And in this warm-up, we are going to rewrite each function in intercept or from intercept form into standard form using a process called FOIL. FOIL means first, outside, inside, last, and that is the order in which I would like you to please go ahead and multiply the parentheses. When you have an answer, please go ahead and restart the video, and then we will see how well you did. All right, let's go ahead and look at letter A. In letter A, I'm going to multiply x times x to get x squared. Then I'm going to multiply x times negative 10 to get minus 10x. Then I'm going to multiply 2 times x to get plus 2x. And finally, 2 times negative 10 to get negative 20. When you combine your like terms, you're going to end up with y equals x squared, negative 10x plus 2x is minus 8x, and then minus 20. Hopefully you did really well on letter A, and you're feeling pretty confident about letter B. Letter B is a little bit different. Our A value is a negative 3. So the best approach, or the approach that I would prefer you to go with, is FOIL out your parentheses and then distribute negative 3 last. So what that looks like is negative 3 stays on the outside, and I'm going to FOIL x times x will give me an x squared, and this stays inside of parentheses because I'm not quite ready to multiply by negative 3 yet. X times positive 1 is plus x, 5 times x is plus 5x, and 5 times 1 is plus 5. Combining my like terms, I have negative 3 times x squared plus 6x, and then plus 5. I'm almost done. I need to get rid of my parentheses in order for this to go into standard form, so I'm going to distribute the 3 to every single term to obtain a final answer of negative 3x squared minus 18x minus 15. What was different about letter B is that there was an A value that was something other than the number 1. Let's go ahead and look at letter C. Letter C is just a monomial being multiplied to a binomial. So this 2x is going to be distributed to each of the terms. So when I distribute it, I'm going to end up with 2x squared minus 8x. And so that one didn't really have nearly as much work to show. Each one of these problems is the foundation for what we're going to be doing in the next few lessons. And what we're going to be doing is this time around, I'm going to be giving you this quadratic function or expression in standard form and asking you to rewrite it in intercept form. And that process is called factoring. So before we get going, I want to make sure that I review some pre-algebra and Algebra 1 vocabulary words. And the first vocabulary word that we have is monomial. And a monomial is a constant, which a constant is a very fancy word for simply a number. It's a constant, it's a variable, which we know that variables are just letters that represent numbers, or a product of these. Product means to multiply. So some examples would be like the number 5, the number or the expression x squared, negative 1/2 xy. I don't know, come up with something else. Anything that you can think of. So this last one will be something that you come up with. All right. Binomial, bi meaning 2. So it is the sum of 2 monomials. So it's where you take some monomials and you add 2 things together, like x plus 2 is a binomial, or 5 minus x squared, or negative 1/2 xy squared minus 7. It's where you have two terms that are being added or subtracted. And finally, we have trinomial. And trinomial is the sum of three monomials. So three monomials would be something like x squared minus 7x plus 11. Standard form is an example of a trinomial. It's not the only type, but it's one example. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be reversing the process and factoring, if possible, trinomials to form or from the form of x squared plus bx plus c. So we're transforming or reversing the process from standard form into intercept form. And so the way that we do that when a is equal to 1 is we have to ask ourselves, so when the leading coefficient is 1, we ask ourselves, what two numbers multiply to equal our c value and together add to equal our b value? So what we're going to be doing in terms of going backwards is we're going to be figuring out, if you look at each of our examples that we had in our warm-up, notice that we had a 2 parentheses, we expanded it out to 4 terms, and then we came back together and combined like terms. Now I want to go backwards. And if you go backwards, especially with example letter A, which is what this lesson's about, when we go backwards and we analyze these two numbers, negative 10 and 2, when you multiply those numbers together, negative 10 times 2, that equals negative 20. And negative 10 plus 2 equals negative 8. These two numbers multiply together to equal the c value, and together added to equal the b value. And then from there, we are able to factor. Notice that that minus 10 is the last number in one parentheses, and that plus 2 is the last number in the other parentheses. So we are going to be working with those numbers because they're going to go into that constant position of our parentheses. All right, so let's go ahead and look at example number 1. In example number 1, we want to factor each trinomial. Writing out the structure of what your final answer is supposed to look like is always crucial. I absolutely want to see this even if you get stuck. The next thing is that we want the first two terms to multiply together to equal our first term. And the only way for you to split apart an x squared is to split it apart into an x and an x. So the only way to have x squared is if you multiply x times x. Now what goes into the last position, that's all dependent on our c value. So we have to figure out what two numbers multiply together to equal negative 18 and together add to equal negative 3. One thing that is helpful is to write out those factors of 18 and kind of figure out what will work for us. So looking at the factors of 18, I have 1 and 18, which 1 minus 18 is not going to give us a negative 3. So I already know that that one's not going to work. I have 2 times 9. And 2 and 9, if I add them together, it gives me an 11. If I subtract them, I get a 7. And so I know that's not going to work. The next value that I have are 3 and 6. I know that, 3 plus 6 equals 9, but 3 minus 6 equals negative 3. Cool. I know that, I'm going to say that, write out what I just said. I know that 3 minus 6 equals negative 3. So what does that tell me? That tells me that one of my parentheses needs a plus 3 and the other parentheses needs a minus 6. Now here's the truth. It doesn't matter if the negative 6 goes first and the plus 3 goes second or vice versa, because when you FOIL it back out and you check your answer, x times x is x squared, x times minus 6 is minus 6x, 3 times x is plus 3x, and 3 times negative 6 is minus 18, I will end up with, no matter what, that minus 3x in the center and that minus 18 at the end. So I know that my final answer is x plus 3 times x minus 6. In terms of showing work, the only work I really absolutely need to see is just your parentheses factored. You can do all of this work in your head. But my visual learners, Some people, they just need to see it, and that's perfectly fine. Let's go ahead and look at letter B. For letter B, I'm going to write down my structure. I know that my answer should look like 2 parentheses. I also know that the only way to get a d squared is to multiply d times d. So now I have to look at the factors of 48 and see what multiplies together to equal 48, but together adds to equal 14. So I'm going to look at 48, and I'm not even going to write down 1 and 48 because I already know that's not going to work. There's 2 and 24, and that's not going to give me a 14, so I know that that's out. There is 3 and 16. That'll give me a 19 or a 13 if I add or subtract, so that's not going to work. 4 and 12. 4 plus 12 is 16. 12 minus 4 is 8. I'm getting close, but it's not quite there. So now I'm going to look at 6 and 8. Okay, I know that 6 plus 8 will give me 14, and 6 times 8 will give me a positive 48. So I'm thinking that inside of my parentheses, I'm going to have a d plus 6 and a d plus 8. And when you multiply it out and you check, d times d is d squared. This would give me plus 8d plus 6d. 8 plus 6 is 14d. 6 times 8 is 48. So that's me doing FOIL in my head to check my answer. Always check your answer. Make sure that you're doing it correctly. The next problem is a solo question, and what I would like you guys to please do is please go ahead and try this solo question the next time I see you in class. If you would like to try it right now, that's perfectly fine. And then check with your neighbor next time that you come in. All right, so this lesson is all about when a equals 1, and the next part is about factoring when a does not equal 1. So I am actually going to skip past a couple of pages. This will be in another video lesson. So this lesson, let me turn on my light really quick. There we go. I'm going to be skipping this page. Let's see if this comes back on.